Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. It's College Football with Sam, and it's been a minute, but due to exhaustion on Sunday, a power outage yesterday, and also hot weather on both days, we're back now. This is the first episode of the week, and we'll be live again tomorrow at 6 p.m. to answer some of your questions that you've submitted in the Discord server. The Withdrawal Wednesday. Make sure if you want to have a question of yours answered in a full video format, click the link in the description, join my Discord server, it's totally free, and navigate to the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel, click it, type in it, and ask me a question, and I'll put it in my really list of things to do for questions to answer for the Withdrawal Wednesday segments. But how are y'all doing? Here in Michigan, it's a very hot day. I imagine it's even warmer in most other states in the lower 48 and also Hawaii. In Alaska, I can't imagine it's nearly as hot as it is right now, even on the coasts where they have some pretty warm days and even months of the year. But yeah, what's on the agenda today is USC and Oregon recruiting, ACC win totals. I also want to take a look at some teams who may have some national title or bust energy surrounding them and address it. Whether or not I think that that's valid or not remains to be seen. And I also want to talk about Michigan State and Jonathan Smith a bit and discuss what proper expectations are for him in the future and how he can retain his job security. Before we begin, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and also hit the notification bell. That way you can get notified when we are live, usually Sunday, Mondays, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, if we are not live on any of those days, I will let you know a few hours beforehand. I'll let you know as soon as I can. So do those things. Thank you very much for your time and for being on here. And first and foremost, I want to talk about USC and USC recruiting. Now, I don't want to talk about USC recruiting in the traditional way of talking about their class and how it's the number one class, because I've already made like multiple videos documenting some of their commitments and praising their class. It's going to finish as the best class in America, probably by a comfortable margin. And you look at their class right now and who 24/7 Sports, I still think the most reliable by a decent margin recruiting service out there. Some prospects that USC does not have commitments from yet that they are in the running for are athlete Jalen Lott and some others such as Devon Benjamin at corner and KJ Ford in edge. It looks like they're still trying to get some defensive commits in particular. And then I see that some of their top targets, Xavier Griffin, who's not going there, was committed but decommitted. Looks like he'll go to Alabama. And then Lamar Brown, I'm pretty sure, is going to go to Texas, Miami, A&M, or LSU. But apparently he was a top target of USC's per 24/7 Sports, USCfootball.com website. It's a class that is probably mostly complete to this point, and they're just going to try and retain the top talents they can get and then get, I think, a few more top 100 players, maybe a few more 3-stars, probably be around 35 commits when it's all said and done. But USC, this is more long-term talk about with their recruiting. There is a loophole in the House settlement in these new college football NIL rules that massively benefits USC. And this rule is something that I'll talk about here. My apologies with my nose. It's itching for whatever reason. Something I'll talk about here in the next few minutes. Just find the text here that contains the text that I want to talk about. USC is out on KJ Ford now that we have Luke Waffle. Thank you, John Nutt, for letting me know of that. What if I told you that the USC Trojans might be college football's premier recruiting program over the next 5 to 10 years? or however long the House settlement and the NIL rules. I don't know why I tripped over myself there. What if I told you that USC football could be the premier recruiting program in college football over the next 5 years or 10 years or maybe even more than a decade? However long the House settlement and the NIL and portal rules contained in it are the rules that govern college football. USC benefits from a massive loophole in the House settlement. And this loophole is described as, quote, location of NIL deals may come into play for determining if value is fair. This is the whole NIL NIL rules in the House settlement. So USC NIL deals would be compared to other marketing deals in Los Angeles. This also goes for, let's say, Texas NIL deals for Austin, Miami NIL deals for Miami, Ohio State NIL deals compared to Columbus, Michigan NIL deals compared to Ann Arbor, maybe Detroit, Northwestern, hypothetically Chicago, Georgia, Athens, maybe Atlanta, because they're pretty close to Atlanta. And you can see the point here that I'm trying to make. Los Angeles is, I think, the biggest city. I think it's the largest in America. I'm going to fact check myself on that right now, actually. But it's one of the wealthiest and one of the biggest for sure. And I think that with how Chad Bowen and Lincoln Riley are currently going about their operation in recruiting, they're not afraid to take large chunks of a certain class and bring them to USC like we're seeing with the 2026 class. And I imagine they won't always have classes that are this big, and they'll have some smaller classes that are more like Oregon's last cycle, where they're extremely high, extremely potent in quality. Okay, it looks like New York is still the largest, but Los Angeles is very close. And I imagine if you include the surrounding suburbs and surrounding cities that are a part of the Los Angeles metro, that it's one of the largest cities in the world. I know that for sure. So, just a little side note there. USC benefits from this massive loophole in the new NIL rules, and that loophole is if you are in a big city with a lot of businesses, plenty of wealth, industry, and you have a large donor base that is close to home or around the world, or that has operations that are close to your university, well, you have the ultimate combination. I just talked about in a separate video how if you own a large corporation like Nike, for example, and you have the money and you have the reach to do deals with multiple schools, well, you basically won't be, I guess the term is fact-checked for whether or not your NIL deal is worth what NIL Go thinks, because you're not only donating to a specific school, you're doing this with everyone, hypothetically. And this loophole here says, location of NIL deal may come into play for determining if value is fair. Los Angeles marketing deals are some of the best, and clearly because of the standard of living in California and their tax rules and more complicated things that I'm not going to talk about because I don't know too much about them. But California is known to be expensive. Their NIL deals consequentially are going to have to be larger in value to somewhat compensate for that. Same with taxes and other things. And they have a lot of wealthy, ultra-wealthy alumni. I talked about that in another video of mine, link in the top right corner of the screen when this is made into a segment. Links in the top right corner of the screen. And I think that combining ultra-wealthy alumni with the fact that if you are a corporation or business that does NIL deals, and as long as you spread them out, you're not going to be investigated. And as long as your deals are viewed as fair market value, and fair market value is whatever the market value is in Los Angeles, that's you know what that is? That's essentially printing money with little to no consequences. Essentially. Of course, that's not a perfect analogy, but the point I'm trying to make here, and before we continue, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this down below. Tell me if you're a USC fan, if you think this is correct, or if you're not a USC fan, still contribute. I'd love to hear you. And we need more USC fans on College Football with Sam. So if you're a USC fan and you're not subscribed, please do so, and like the video to get us in the algorithm, and join our Discord server via the link in the description. But something like that loophole, what it does is it disproportionately benefits USC. It could disproportionately benefit a school like Northwestern because they're in Chicago. Rutgers, if they were able to tap into the New York City market. I am thinking of, for example, Georgia with maybe Atlanta. Miami for sure with Miami. Texas with Austin and a lot of the surrounding Texas cities. Texas is a booming state, huge population. I think of Ohio State with Columbus and the fact that Ohio isn't a huge state, so I imagine they could maybe try and tap into some of the market value in surrounding cities like Cleveland or Cincinnati. Don't know if that's reaching too far out or not. And I could go on and on. I mean, Washington with Seattle, Michigan with Ann Arbor, and then Detroit because Detroit's pretty close to Ann Arbor. What this loophole, and it's the same with the other loopholes too, where if your donor is a corporation and they're donating and making deals with different players in different schools, they won't necessarily get checked. Those loopholes just benefit the rich. And USC is a member of the rich. They are the blue blood class of college football. They always have been. They're a top 10 program, and I would argue top 5 historically. USC, I will declare it here as sort of a way too early thing with these rules that benefit them, with how their recruiting is on fire, and with the staff that they have, and with Lincoln Riley, who when he has NFL talent, and when he has a good staff, hasn't always had a good one, but has at times, and right now I think he does, he reaches playoff games. He hasn't won a playoff game, but I imagine his late 2010s, bless me, Oklahoma teams would have won playoff games if there was the 12-team playoff format. Certainly so. Maybe because of the different formatting, the 2017 team would have won a national title at Oklahoma, for example. So they're a benefactor, a massive benefactor. I think they're the biggest benefactor, actually, of these new NIL rules. And overall, I don't think these rules hold much weight because of the fact that there's no collective bargaining agreement. And I imagine, there's obviously still under the table stuff. And I've already told you about some of the loopholes. But for a program like USC, who doesn't really have to think about any potential consequences because of these loopholes, and they have a lot of super wealthy alumni. So you're not just hitting the fact that you're in LA and your marketing deals are compared to LA marketing deals. You're also hitting on the standpoint that they have thousands of alumni who have a net worth of $30 million or more. And I imagine several of those are billionaires. And USC is a football school. This is not like UCLA, who also has a lot of super wealthy alumni, or Northwestern, or the Ivy Leagues. This is USC, a private institution that churns out geniuses and millionaires and billionaires that has a rich football tradition. Miami is similar. They have both the donor class and the city. And I could imagine some other Big Ten schools do. Oregon is the donors, not the city. Michigan and Ohio State, especially Ohio State, I think have the city, but Michigan still is Detroit, and both have the donors too. And I could go on and on and on, but I think USC outdoes everyone else there. This text that I read to you earlier about, the specific loopholes from a trusted friend of mine, I read this in the House settlement as well. Didn't think about it in that way initially, but then I thought about it some more after reading his text, and I thought, yeah, I think this is a loophole. So maybe it's not. and maybe I'm mistaken here, but I think USC has a distinct advantage with these rules. And then I would say moving forward, if you were to average the loopholes that I know of together, I think your current top 5 recruiting programs in the future are USC at 1, Texas trailing close behind them, then you have a gap, and you got Miami, Oregon, and Ohio State. Like factoring in donors, factoring in the market that people will be comparing, the people who matter, if they matter at all, will be comparing your NIL deal to make sure that it's fair. Again, don't exactly know how effective even that'll be. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter at all, but looking at these new rules, USC is a massive opportunity here. And USC right now, I mean, no wonder they have 30 commits, and no wonder they were able to easily get Mark Bowman and easily get Luke Waffle over the likes of Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, for example. No wonder they've been able to retain Kini Pepe out of Florida, a highly coveted offensive tackle who's the second best at his position for 24/7 Sports. Just no wonder. And I imagine they'll get several more highly touted commits too. And you look at their 2027 class, and they don't have any commits right now, but I imagine that class is going to be certainly top 5 in quality. I don't know how many players they will bring in, but they're just signing guys left and right and left and right. And it helps USC twofold. You're not just building up your roster and massively upgrading. You are taking away players that would have gone previously to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State 5 years ago, and that just a year ago would have gone to Oregon and Texas as well as those other 3 programs. And now they are going to LA. That's where they're going. Not that any of those other 5 programs are struggling to recruit, by the way. I mean, Ohio State's going to finish with a top 4 class. Georgia will as well, I imagine. Miami and Oregon, I think, will finish with quality classes. Miami's is already top 10. Oregon's is the best in America right now, even though it's small. It's the best in terms of average rank per recruit. And then Alabama's is up there as well. It's not that they're struggling, and they're not going to struggle. It's the fact that USC has gotten to a point where they maybe could even leapfrog those programs in recruiting due to some of these new rules and the fact that they have alignment. Their donors are engaged. Their staff on the field, off the field, athletic department is aligned. USC benefits, and I think they are going to be a huge winner in the future of college football, not just in terms of reaching the national championship, possibly, but I think in terms of possibly even winning it, and Riley may be winning his first. I think they're certainly a college football playoff contender from here on out, and I also believe that they are eventually going to be a Big Ten title contender too. National championships, I think, will take a while to reach USC because I know their roster isn't where they want it to be to win titles, and I don't think it will be that way for at least 2 more seasons. So you're probably looking at 2027 or after that. But this class is massive. The recruiting juice they have is huge. The fact they were able to retain D'Anton Lynn when Penn State went after him before Knowles became available, that was big. The strength and conditioning coach, hiring and firing. I just love it all. I love where USC is heading. I don't think this is like last cycle's class, and I don't think the hype is fake. I don't think so at all. Thank you so much for watching this segment. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscription, and I thank you once again for watching. All right, now we can move on to Oregon. Oregon's in a different position from USC. Oregon doesn't benefit quite as much from these new rules, although I think they have some safeguards that certainly help them in this new landscape. And then they also have been struggling in recruiting. You know, USC is the number 1 class right now with 30 commits. They have over 3 times the commits that Oregon does. Oregon is the 34th ranked recruiting class with only 9 commits. But they have an average player rank of a 93.73. At one point, they had more than 10 commits, and it looked like they were going to once again have a top 5, maybe even number 1 class in the nation. So I want to talk about why I'm not worried about Oregon recruiting, because in truth, I'm not worried about Oregon recruiting. I think that they're going to find a way to at least get a top 10 class. I think it will be one that could easily flirt with being a top 5 class. I think it will certainly be top 5 in terms of quality. And I think that with the money they have and with the hustle that Lanning and his staff have, there isn't a lot to worry about with Oregon. There just isn't. Not one bit, I don't think. And also, if you want me to answer a question you have, or if you want to tell me something and have me respond to it, send in a super chat, and in between the different segments that I run here, I will answer your super chats. I'll try and get to those for sure at the end if there are multiple of them, but if there's one here or one there, I'll answer it during the breaks very briefly. Oregon currently has the 34th best recruiting class per 24/7 Sports. 34th. 9 commits, an average player rank per commit of a 93.75. It's the highest in all of college football currently in terms of quality, higher than Alabama's, who recently got several 3 stars and lower 4 stars, higher than Ohio State's, who's a 93.18, higher than USC or Notre Dame, who have over 20 commits and an average player rank above a 91. Oregon has a great quality class, but the quantity is certainly lacking. They're outside the top 25 in national ranked recruiting classes, well outside the top 25 at this point. And they've had different players poached from them, whether it was by Washington. Washington poached one of their better offensive line prospects, Cody Green. And they've lost out on some commits, like even today, Ryder Lyons went to BYU and Oregon was in on him. I'm not worried about Oregon recruiting, and I'm going to tell you why. But before I tell you why, I encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. And make sure to hit the notification bell, not just for my channel, but the Oregon Football Podcast playlist, whatever you want to call it, that's linked in the description. Also, check out my Discord server. Would love to have more Oregon fans join there. Links in the description, too. And by liking the video and watching it all the way through, you will boost our presence in the algorithm, which would be very much appreciated. We're trying to hit 6-figure subscriber numbers here on College Football with Sam. In talking about Oregon, they got Jet Washington at safety recently, which was massive. Much needed get for them, and really made the class even better in quality than it already was. And this Oregon recruiting class right now, I mean, they have Keandre Harrison, a 4-star athlete per 24/7, not using the composite, top 50 player. Jet Washington's a top 20 player, 18th specifically, number 2 safety. Tredarian Ball, 51st ranked player nationally, number 3rd running back out of Texas. Tony Cumberland is the number 1 player out of Oregon on the defensive line. 6'4.5", 285 pounds. Messiah Hampton, top 200 player from Rochester, New York. They got him over Syracuse. And then Tristan Phillips, Xavier Lerisi, Villami Moala, and Dutch Horisk are some other players that they have earned commitments from. And when you look at their prospects board, they're still going after Calvin Russell from Miami, Florida, Jaira Edwards, a safety from Maryland, Devon Benjamin, a corner from California. It looks like they're going after Cortez Redding, a safety from Georgia, too. They're interested in Chauncey Kennan from Florida. And then there are some other players, such as Bryson Beaver, looks like is on their board. And I know for a fact that they're going to get a look at some other players. I mean, Emmanuel Iheanacho, for example, is someone who is a must-get. But just from my intuition, and my intuition obviously doesn't mean a whole lot, but it does feel like he's leading for them. And obviously it sounds like Tyler Atkinson is in good graces with Dan Lanning and the staff too. Anthony Jones out of Alabama is someone they're warm on. John Turrentine III out of Texas is a tackle they're warm on. This class can still finish as one of the top classes in America. They'd have to hit on a lot of the players they have left. But personally, I imagine with Oregon's NIL, with how Lanning is a hard worker and an elite recruiter, his staff, whether it's Tosh Lupoy or Will Stein or Alik Terry, or Tony Tuioti. They are all great recruiters. I look at Oregon and I think that they're in good hands. I think they're in elite hands. I'm not worried at all, personally. Now, will this class be as good as last year's class? I think that would take a lot. But again, Tosh Lupoy, Chris Hampton, Dan Lanning, Will Stein, and then the money they have, the resources they have, the fact that last year they were the only team to go undefeated in the regular season. They won their conference, the Big Ten. They beat the national champions, Ohio State. Although Ohio State did beat them back and beat them worse than Oregon beat them, they still earned a win over Ryan Day and one of the top programs in America. I mean, Texas couldn't say that, and Texas is recruiting at an insane clip. Georgia beat Texas, but Georgia didn't even escape the quarterfinals. They didn't advance further than Oregon did, for example. And I will tell you, Oregon as a program right now is still better than Notre Dame. They didn't lose to NIU. And Notre Dame, for a minute there, looked like they were going to get dominated in the same fashion that Ohio State dominated Oregon. And Oregon's recruited better than Notre Dame. I think that Oregon has a higher ceiling and a higher floor. And Oregon under Lanning has been better places than Freeman has at Notre Dame. And I think Freeman's running a wonderful operation and one of the best in the Midwest. You look at Washington, their rival from the state up north of Oregon. They're way better as a program than Washington is right now. And they're better than a lot of programs in the SEC, I got to be honest. I would tab Oregon's a better program than Alabama right now, especially if we're to be forward thinking here and project some of the best programs. I love their staff. I love their mission, their energy. I think that they are going to finish with a great recruiting class in 2025. I really do believe that. And I think that history supports my opinion. I think that we all know of Phil Knight and the NIL deals that Oregon can provide and the environment that they have, the facilities, the staff, the culture. I think that Oregon's going to be fine. I think they're going to surge in the fall when they start winning again. Maybe they'll get some commitments even this summer, some more, even though visiting period's over. Who knows? But I'm fairly confident they're going to rise up, get a top 10 class at least, maybe even somehow finish top 5, especially if it's top 5 in quality, not overall. That would be close to top 5 because I think quality over quantity matters, especially right now, if you can keep the quality there. And I think Oregon's done a good job of that. And Oregon's not afraid to go into the portal and get some good players, even though now with the new rules that will be harder. I still think that Oregon, with Phil Knight, with other donors that they certainly have, with the engagement in their football program, I think they're fine from here on out. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all those things. Thank you very much. Oh man, I have to itch my nose again. I hate this. I don't get what's going on. It doesn't help that my room that I'm in is pretty hot. It doesn't help at all. It's upstairs, not the best ventilation. Doesn't always help, but gosh, that is annoying. Like my nose is itching. Again, doesn't help, but we'll get through it. Oh, that's for later. Almost, I'm a little disoriented for whatever reason, but that's for later. We're going to be talking about ACC win totals now. That's what we're going to be talking about. And then we will get to Michigan State. We will get to Penn State. We will get to Clemson. We'll get to all of these things. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now we're going to talk about, obviously, the ACC and what I think about the ACC win totals, give you some overs, give you some unders, all that lovely stuff. And yeah, this will be released as a segment. Let me know what you think of the ACC win totals. And if you're a Big Ten, if you're a fan of the Big Ten or a Big Ten team, not really interested in the ACC, stay on because Notre Dame is involved in here too. It's ACC win totals plus Notre Dame. I include Notre Dame in the ACC because they're an ACC member in everything but football, and it's just simpler. And yeah, we'll talk about that. And it will matter because in the 12-team playoff, you're going to see an ACC team every year. This year, there's a good chance you'll see two, much like last year, and they'll probably match up with a Big Ten team. One of them will, at least. And my playoff predictions, those will be coming out sometime within the next 7 days, whether later this week or early next week. So make sure to stay tuned for any of those. I don't know why I'm so... Well, I know why I'm so itchy. It's hot, and whenever I sweat, I get really, really itchy. I'll just stop thinking about it. Which teams in the ACC will go over or under, will overshoot or just fall short of their Vegas preseason win totals? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Which ACC teams will overshoot or just come short of their preseason win total that is set by Vegas? Let me know down below throughout the video which win totals you agree with, disagree with, what you think is an easy over or an easy under, because that's what we're going to talk about here. And it's not just going to be the ACC. We're also talking about Notre Dame too. So not just the 17 ACC members in football, but Notre Dame as well included to make it 18, make it a nice even number. More so than that, though, because we couldn't just make a video about Notre Dame's win total. Now, could we? And Notre Dame is an ACC member in all aspects except for football, really. And even then, they have to play several ACC teams every year. So I just think it's simpler to include Notre Dame in the conversation. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some very confident over-under picks from myself personally. And we're going to have fun with it. I'm going to talk about these teams as well and give my reasons behind why I'm making the picks that I am. Make sure to like the video, and especially since we're really just reaching out to the ACC consistently for the first time this year at College Football with Sam, subscribe and hit the notification bell, especially if you are a fan of an ACC school or Notre Dame. And I'd love for some of you to join the Discord server via the link in the description where my fans talk with me. You can engage with me. You can also ask me a question via the hashtag YouTube mailbox section in the Discord server, the channel, and I'll make a video about it. So if you want to ask me an ACC or Notre Dame themed question, do that. And like the video again, subscribe, comment down below, and visit any other links in the description if you want to support the channel. Everything I just told you about is free and just helps the channel out and also helps you out to get quality football content. Let's pull these rankings over, though. These win totals, rather, which I guess are rankings in a wide, very broad sense. Of course, you're not who your record says you are, the famous Josh Pateism, but there is some correlation in that with these win totals, because these win totals are made with preseason power rankings and predictive strength of schedule models and other things. And the teams toward the top are going to be favored over the teams at the bottom more often than not by double digits. Notre Dame, for example, who's first in the ACC and Notre Dame win totals, would be favored by several touchdowns over Stanford, who has the lowest win total at 3.5. But let's get into this. I'll go through from the top to the bottom in win totals, and then I'll tell you some of the picks I have, explain them, and give some analysis on each of my picks. Notre Dame at first, over under 10.5 wins. Clemson and Miami are both tied for second. Their over-unders are 9.5 wins. SMU, Louisville, they're tied for fourth at 8.5 wins. Then we got Georgia Tech, Florida State, North Carolina, they're tied for sixth at 7.5 wins. Pittsburgh, NC State, Duke. You also got Virginia and Virginia Tech. They are tied 6.5 wins, tied at 9th place. Syracuse and Boston College, along with California, are tied at 14th for 5.5 wins. Wake Forest is at 4.5. Stanford, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, is at 3.5. So I look at these win totals, and some things that jump out to me immediately are Clemson. Clemson jumps out to me pretty quickly because I look at Clemson and what they bring back and the team that they have assembled and their schedule as well. And I think, how likely is it that they lose 3 games, regular season, not counting conference championship, not counting CFP, at which point yeah, I could think it's somewhat likely they lose 3 games. Their schedule is week 1 against LSU, week 2 versus Troy. They play at Georgia Tech week 3, host Syracuse week 4. They get a bye in week 5. Back-to-back road trips to North Carolina in week 6 and Boston College week 7. They host SMU week 8. They get a bye week 9. And then off their final bye, they play Duke at home week 10, Florida State at home week 11, Louisville on the road week 12, Furman at home week 13, and at South Carolina week 14. The toughest games in my mind are LSU at home, Georgia Tech on the road, SMU at home, Louisville on the road, South Carolina on the road. The 5 toughest games. And really, I would say maybe you want to include North Carolina, for example, or maybe Florida State since it's a rivalry game and Florida State should also get better. You probably have 6 wins automatically built in, and then you're not going to lose all of your tough games because you are a better team than every team you will be facing in the regular season if you're Clemson. I mean, you will be better than LSU. You will be better than Georgia Tech. You will be better than North Carolina, especially better than Florida State. I think you will be better than rival South Carolina, and you will be better than SMU. And you get some of those teams at home. Some of them are on the road. But I think that you will at least split those 6 tough games. And that's where you get 9-3. But for Clemson to lose 2 of them, I even think in a sense is unlikely because the best teams they'll face from a power ratings angle are LSU at home in week 1. Clemson is way more experienced. They have better chemistry because they're not relying on the portal for so many positions like LSU does, and they're at home yet again. South Carolina on the road in week 14. South Carolina's a younger team with not a ton of experience. My cat says hi. I don't know why he's up here, but my cat Jack says hi, and he'll probably be on my lap for this entire segment. Anyway, to make an analogy that's very fitting of the interruption that just happened, I am Clemson, and my cat is Clemson's schedule. Like, Clemson should be able to handle their schedule with ease. Maybe I'll get a scratch, maybe I'll get a bite mark, but I see 11-1 or 10-2 far more likely than 9-3. I think 12-0 is more likely than 9-3, and I think 10-2 and 11-1 are far more likely than 9-3. So that's why I go with the over 9.5, and I think it's very easy. There are 2 schools who I could see their floors being 10-2. Penn State, whose floor I think is actually 10-2, and Clemson, who I think their floor is 9-3, but it's kind of worst case scenario, and I don't know if it's even a realistic floor for Clemson to go 9-3. Hey, it's okay. Calm down. Notre Dame for the under was a pretty easy pick for me. And that was because their schedule is deceivingly tough. It's not one of the toughest schedules in the world. Never said that. But when you open on the road at Miami in week 1, Miami's upgraded at defensive coordinator. They have a veteran QB who is coming off an injury, yes, but Notre Dame's quarterback's also coming off of an injury, and they're replacing their DC, Al Golden, with Chris Ash, who I think is a very clear downgrade. So Notre Dame, changing identity a little bit at QB, going from Riley Leonard, who struggled as a thrower and was a really good scrambler, had excellent pocket presence, to a redshirt freshman in CJ Carr, who will probably be a better thrower, but struggle with pocket presence and definitely mobility compared to Leonard. Mobility for the rest of his career will be inferior to Leonard's, I believe, because Leonard was just that mobile and that much of an athlete. Pocket presence we'll see, but Leonard was elite in pocket presence last year with Notre Dame and also with Duke. Really fun quarterback to watch, absolute trooper, absolute dog. We'll see if that continues. And then you look at the losses Notre Dame incurred. You know, they lost Xavier Watts, really the heart of their defense. And they went through injuries on the O-line and injuries at the D-line. They lost a lot in the trenches. So even though they had some players step up there and replace either outgoing transfers or former starters, I just think they are losing some production there. They did bring in Malachi Fields, and I am far less confident in the Notre Dame under than the Clemson over. But the Clemson over, I think, might be the easiest pick in the world. Might be the easiest. Because I don't know if their floor is even 9-3. Notre Dame could easily go 9-3 this year. And the win total isn't 9.5. The win total is 10.5. They're saying 10-2 or 11-1. Well, when you play Miami on the road week 1, you get a bye in week 2, thankfully, because you host Texas A&M in week 3, who returns more than you do and has staff continuity. And you caught them last year in their own place in game 1, year 1. They're going to be in year 2, and they'll be in game 3 with a better quarterback than they started out with last year and better talent, more experience. Their staff is going to be in year 2, so that'll have a big impact. Purdue's a game in week 4 at home that Notre Dame should easily win. They have to travel to Arkansas in week 5. That's a sneaky game. They get Boise State at home week 6, NC State home week 7, USC at home in week 8, where Notre Dame, from a turnover standpoint and experience standpoint last year, I mean, they were young, yes, but they had a lot of players step up, won some close games in the playoffs. A lot went right for them, and a lot went wrong for USC. So I feel like if those teams both regress to the mean, which is likely, Notre Dame should get worse, USC should get better. And USC should have a better chance to win this year than they did last year, even with the game being on the road. Week 9, you get a bye. Week 10, road trip to Boston College. Week 11, home against Navy. That'll be a blowout like always. Week 12 against Pitt. Pitt has good linebackers. They'll take advantage of turnovers and a young QB. Week 13, host Syracuse. Week 14, travel to Stanford. Should be a blowout. I'm not saying Notre Dame will win only 8 or 7 games. That's not what I'm saying here. Like, Freeman is too good of a coach with too good of a culture, staff, and talent base to do that. What I am saying is they could go 9-3, and even if they go 10-2, that's still under on the win total. And I think 10-2 is more likely than 11-1, and I think 9-3 is far more likely than 12-0 with this Notre Dame team. If they go 12-0 again, I will eat my words, and they can go 12-0. But I think 9-3 and 10-2 both are much more likely than 12-0, and 10-2 is more likely than 11-1. So that, combined with the change of identity and type at quarterback and a downgrade at DC, makes me confident in that. I'm also confident in Georgia Tech going over their 7.5 win total, and California going under. The logic behind California is just that they got gutted in the portal. Lost all their best players. Justin Wilcox is now directly reporting to Ron Rivera, the general manager. It just seems chaotic. And they have to travel to Oregon State, San Diego State, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Louisville. That's a lot of traveling. A lot of traveling. Now, they only get 3 road games, which is helpful. But, again, it's a lot of traveling, and at times that I think are inconvenient. For example, traveling to Virginia Tech and then traveling to Louisville 2 weeks later, you get Virginia sandwiched in between and then North Carolina off the bye before Virginia Tech. You could go 0-4 there. You could also go 2-2, but you could go 0-4. And then traveling to San Diego State and then Boston College back-to-back, you're going to Southern California, and then you're going to Massachusetts. Wow. And it's not like home games against SMU or Minnesota are going to be easy. Duke, North Carolina, and even Virginia may not be easy with how much California lost. I think California, at best, could go bowling, but I think 5 or 4 wins is more likely than 6 at this point. For Georgia Tech, if Haynes King is healthy, this team should win 9 games, potentially 10. They get Colorado, Wake Forest, Duke, NC State, and Boston College on the road. They will be favored over all of those teams minus maybe Duke and NC State. And I know they're favored over Colorado. Very short line, but they're favored there. And then their home stretch, Gardner-Webb, Clemson, Temple, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Georgia. 5 of those games should be gimmies, and between Georgia and Clemson, with how much Georgia loses, with how Clemson struggled against the run, and the fact that Georgia Tech returns over 60% of their production, a quarterback in Haynes King, who was top 10 in QBR last year, a running back in Jamal Haynes behind a great offensive line that brings back Keelan Rutledge, and the fact that they brought in 2 good portal receivers, a great portal D tackle in Akello Stone to to pair with Jordan Vandenberg, who is one of my favorite ACC tackles, Georgia Tech should win more than 7 games. I mean, they should go 8-4. They went 6-6 in Key's first year as the full-time head coach, not interim. Then went 7-5 regular season. This year, I think 8-4 is likely. And they don't have Notre Dame. They don't play Notre Dame and Georgia. I know they play Clemson, but they played Notre Dame neutral field, and then they played Georgia on the road. They get Georgia neutral field and Clemson at home, and Clemson early. And I think you'd prefer to get Clemson early because Tom Allen's in his first year. And since Tom Allen is an upgrade over Wes Goodwin, I think the longer they have Allen there with that defense, the better the defense will get as the season goes on, especially since Clemson's deep and they can lose some guys and afford to lose them and not have much of a drop-off. So Georgia Tech, I think, is an easy overplay. Some other plays that I'm confident in, but are certainly tougher. The over for Miami. I think that Miami is, in terms of just raw talent and development, I'm pretty sure Miami's the deepest ACC team. They just do not have the amount of X-factor players that Clemson does. Miami is the best setup in the ACC moving forward. If you include Notre Dame, I think they're kind of in the same tier. I'd go with Notre Dame for coaching and culture. I'd go Miami for recruiting all day, especially with the new rules. Clemson, as we've already talked about, for the here and now, I think is the best. And I think the best by a comfortable margin. But for the following seasons, I would say Miami's the best. And you're already seeing flashes of it now. Sure, they brought in a transfer portal QB. Sure. They brought in a transfer portal running back, but he's going to be the third string guy. They brought in a transfer center in James Brockermeyer, but they returned Inez Cooper. They returned Francis Mauigoa, Markel Bell, Matthew McCoy, someone who's ready to step up at guard. So most of their guards still recruited and developed from high school. Josiah Trader is someone who's out of high school. They brought in transfers C.J. Daniels and Tony Johnson. Elijah Lofton, someone who was on their roster last year. Same with Reuben Bain Jr., Justin Scott, Ahmad Moten. David Blay is an incoming transfer. Akeem Mesidor was on their roster last year. Same with Malik Bryant and Armando Blount. Wesley Besaint was on their roster last year. Same with Raul Aguirre Jr. Brought in transfer Mohamed Touré. Jacoby Thomas, Zechariah Poyser at safety are transfers. Same with Charles Brantley and Xavier Lucas, though they do return the talented O.J. Frederic. Their only position group that's relying mostly on transfers is the secondary. I mean, they're kind of doing, in my mind, what Oregon did entering last year, where they loaded up on some portal talent. An offensive lineman for Miami, I think it was 2 for Oregon entering 2023, or maybe just 1. Got a transfer QB, got a lot of transfers in the secondary, and a transfer D tackle for Miami, though Oregon got 2. Honestly, last year's Oregon, this year's Miami, I think those teams are going to be very similar. And I think that's not just the case in terms of roster build. I think it's in the case that they will probably win some games that are a little bit too close for comfort, much like they did last year. But with a superior defensive coordinator, with a veteran in Carson Beck, with an offensive line that I think is just going to continue to have its floor be raised year over year over year, with O-line coach Alex Mirabal, and the fact that Cristobal doesn't have the roster he wants yet. Miami is still leveling up their talent. I think that the days of Miami going 6-6 and 7-5 are over, especially since every program outside of maybe SMU, and that's more future looking, not present looking, every program the ACC added in the here and now is inferior to Miami. So that gives more teams that are under, that gives Miami more teams on their schedule that they are usually under every year. A stark contrast, for example, to Kentucky in the SEC. I know Kentucky isn't Miami's program, but the comparison there is Kentucky gets pushed down the hierarchy, gets pushed down with Texas and Oklahoma joining. Miami stays the same or gets pushed up with SMU, Cal, and Stanford joining. And their average wins per season, of course, are going to be pushed up as well, because they're going to be facing some of those teams, multiple or at least one of them probably, every year. They have an early game against Notre Dame. I would favor Miami right now in that game slightly. Ultimately, it comes down to whether or not Mario Cristobal can improve game management wise when it comes to Miami winning ACC championships and competing for a national title. But he could break through at some point. And 8.5 wins was their win total, I think, a week or so ago. That was an easy over. 9.5 is a little bit more difficult, but I'm pretty confident Miami goes 10-2, at least. 11-1 may not be more likely than 9-3. I'll have to think about that more, but I think 10-2 is more likely than 9-3. And I would say that 11-1 is more likely than 8-4, and that 12-0 is more likely than 7-5. So it's a confident over for me. Louisville and SMU and Duke are confident overs for me as well. SMU and Louisville, I think, will at least get 9 wins. I'm more confident on Louisville than SMU because SMU plays a tougher non-conference slate, facing Baylor, facing TCU. Louisville faces Kentucky and a bunch of scrubs. Duke, I'm confident in their over because it's 6.5. If it were 7.5, I'd probably tell you to stay away. Duke returns studs on defense like Terry Moore and Chandler Rivers, and I think Darian Mensah is criminally underrated. And they could get Illinois non-conference. They could get Tulane on the road. And their road games outside of Clemson I don't think are very tough. As for Louisville and SMU, I have a lot of faith in their head coaches, and I have a lot of faith in their recruiting schemes. For Louisville, it's more of the portal. SMU, it's more out of high school. I think that SMU and Louisville, I think there's a good chance that between the two of them, they get 1 or 2 wins over Clemson and Miami, and both of them play Clemson and Miami. So combining their records against Clemson and Miami, you could see a 500 record between the two schools against those. And heck, with how Clemson disappointed a bit last year against Louisville, how SMU almost beat them. And look, Louisville's high 50s in returning production, but with the portal and how Brahms worked it, if they hit there again, that may not be a problem. And SMU returns just over 60% of their 2024 production. So there's a world where they win 3 out of 4 of those games, which would be completely bananas, and at that point would eliminate, in my mind, the ACC from winning it all. Possibly. But then again, Clemson could afford to lose to one of those teams and still win it all. They lost to Pitt in 2016 on their way to winning a title. I just like their staffs, I like their culture, and I like their QBs. Miller Moss is a perfect fit at Louisville, and Kevin Jennings is a great player at SMU. And they have players on defense. SMU has really good safeties, really good trench play on the D-line. Louisville has good trench play and a really good wide receiver core and some linebackers. I think Florida State's going under. I see 6-6 or 7-5. And Virginia Tech, last year was their year. They got pillaged in the portal. They do have some nice seasons, but or some nice players is what I meant. Some nice seasons in the past, of course, but that's long and gone. I think Virginia Tech is more likely to have a losing record than to even go 6-6. So the fact their win total 6.5 and not 5.5 tells me I think they are going to go under, and I'm confident in that. I'd stay away from North Carolina, Pittsburgh, NC State, Wake, Virginia, Syracuse, Boston College. Wake is in there twice for whatever reason, but I have Wake going 4-8, so maybe that combined with the new staff and my liking of Jake Dickert, yeah, they should be around their win total, so stay away from it. And then Stanford, I'd stay away from too, just because it's a pain in the butt to travel out that way. Who knows, maybe they go 4-8. If I am wrong in any of these win totals, it's going to be Pittsburgh, 6.5 when they won 7 regular season games last year, and they're at plus odds, so they're being picked to kind of go 6-6. It may be an obvious overplay, or at least one you should be confident in. They should beat West Virginia on the road, and Duquesne and Central Michigan should be automatic wins. There's 3. They get Louisville off the bye in week 5, and Pittsburgh, it's not a tough place to play, but it can be boring, and it's an easy trap game because it's boring and empty. And Narduzzi's a competent enough coach to, I think, utilize the bye to his advantage, and Louisville plays Bowling Green before Pittsburgh. and Pittsburgh hosts Louisville. They get Boston College at home week 6, travel to Florida State week 7. I don't think Florida State's better than Pittsburgh. They play Syracuse in week 8. In the back-to-back road games, you probably lose one of them, and Louisville could easily be a loss. NC State at home week 9. Stanford on the road week 10. Pitt's better than Stanford. Just depends on whether or not they can, face the travel. They get Notre Dame at home off the bye week 12. Georgia Tech on the road week 13. Miami at home week 14. Every single one of these games is winnable. Now, Notre Dame and Miami are way better than Pittsburgh. So let's just peg those as losses. Well, that's 2. Let's say Georgia Tech is an L. On the road, Tech's pretty good. They're better than Pitt. 9-3 at best. Syracuse on the road, Florida State on the road. Let's say you split one of those. Now you're 8-4. And between Stanford on the road, NC State at home, Boston College at home, Louisville on the road, better than most of those teams. Let's say you lose to Louisville. Well, you're 7-5, and you're over your win total still. So the reason I'm saying stay away from it is because I could see Pittsburgh once again collapse, and talent-wise, they're not really up there. They're pretty inconsistent too, but maybe it's an obvious overplay. And if I'm wrong here, I think it would either be Miami under 9.5 or Notre Dame over. And I'm going Notre Dame over because I think they could lose to Miami or USC or A&M and win the rest of their games. There's a world where that happens. I mean, they get USC and A&M at home, and then Miami is not the most intimidating road environment in the world. I imagine that stadium will be full for that game. I imagine so. Full of Miami fans and some Notre Dame fans, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, I just think Notre Dame is very talented. They're well coached overall. I think Mike Denbrock's one of the best in the business at being an offensive coordinator. And with the talent they bring back on the lines of scrimmage, more so O-line, D-line got pretty gutted. What they bring back at linebacker, what they bring back in corner with Leonard Moore, they upgraded their wide receiver room. They have a wonderful running back duo in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Maybe they're just too much for, 10 teams they play. They win a close game, and then they lose a close game, and there you go, 11-1, or maybe they even go 12-0. I think that's a possibility. Those are my ACC win total picks and analysis. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, hit the bell, and comment your thoughts down below. I will see you all soon in the next segment. Oh man, now we get to talk about Michigan State and Jonathan Smith and some expectations. Let me see what the chat is saying. Okay, guys, I'm starving, and I'm also thirsty, so I'm going to get a drink of water to tide me over here. It'll be edited out when I release this episode in full on Spotify. Just sit back, sit tight. We'll get to Michigan State, do probably 10 minutes on them, maybe 15 or so, and then we'll get to the teams of Penn State, Texas, and Clemson, and why I think these teams may be in a national title or bust situation. And I'll also give a final answer on which of those 3 teams I think actually is in one and which can afford to not win the national title or at least not reach the national championship game this season. So I'll be right back, just getting a drink of water. See you guys very soon. Hey guys. Okay, there the camera is. Sam is obsessed with Larry Johnson. Who's saying that? Oh, it's Andrew Mueller. Look, I just think he's You guys know my thoughts on this. I think that Knowles was basically the guy who was responsible for the defensive turnaround. That's just what it was. That's my opinion. I think that the fact that JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer averaged out to be a day 3, late day 2 player is kind of an atrocity. Just saying. That's kind of what I think. Not saying Larry Johnson's bad. I still think he's good even though he's old. But the Ohio State standard is elite. It is. It's like this. It's like, I mean, I would much rather defend Larry Johnson than Justin Fry, though. I mean, if you think Justin Fry was elite at anything, then I will just show you tape of the Michigan game and the Texas game and say that if Fry was even remotely good at his job, they win both of those games by 4 or 5 touchdowns. That's all I'm saying. It's just a critique of one coach. One coach. You know, Ohio State has like what? I mean, last year they probably had 2 or 3 coaches who didn't live up to the standard but were still average or good. And then they had the rest of the coaches that were great or elite. And that's pretty normal for staffs that win it all. I mean, Michigan's staff in 23, it's not like Ron Bellamy was this fantastic wide receivers coach. He's pretty average. And then, like, Georgia in 2022, I forget who their wide receivers coach was. I really do forget that. But I can't. I'd have to think more about that. I don't know Georgia's staffs in those years as intimately as I do Michigan's or Ohio State's. But it's pretty normal for a national title winning staff to have someone who probably doesn't live up to the standard, but is still good, and then everyone else is elite or something. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, I could make more videos about Larry Johnson. I've actually recently kind of been on his defense. People are acting like the Ohio State 2026 recruiting class is something to panic about. It's like, it's a top 5 class. And Kari Wilder looks like someone who is going to be a 5-star defensive tackle. Like, calm down. And offensive line recruiting actually exists at Ohio State now. The hiatus of recruiting offensive line players is no longer a thing anymore. So I don't get what the fuss is about. I don't. I do not get what the fuss is about at all. Like, I just don't. And the other thing too is this is not the 2010s anymore. Ohio State's not just going to easily get 20 to 25 players who are all elite because there's more competition at the top. And I would say consequentially, because of that, culture matters more than ever. And Ohio State has like a I would say top 3 at worst culture in the nation, might even be the best. Their players don't get in trouble. They don't want to transfer out. Development is great, elite on an average basis. Day's one of the best game managers in the sport. I mean, you could get me rambling about Ohio State, even though we're not talking about him here. Just a viewer brought it up. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy what the talk is. I mean, I won't do it today. I might do it on Thursday, but I mean, the whole stuff about Buckeye Scoop is insane. And it's not even really that remotely surprising either. Their whole operation. I'm talking about the main show, not any of the sub shows. So like, I'm not talking about Dev or Mello or Moses. I'm talking about the main operation, like Nevada Buck and Kirk Barton. Like, the whole show was a clown car. I mean, they're an Ohio State show, and all they're talking about is Michigan. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine if I'm a Michigan fan? It's well known, but it's also not. Like, I actually get a lot of Buckeye or Spartan fans or other guys that they either forget that I'm a Michigan fan and they're kind of shocked a little bit when I remind them, or they just never knew. Imagine if I was an obvious, biased, sunshine pumper Michigan fan, like the Michigan fan who told you that Connor Stallions did nothing wrong. Imagine if I were that, and my whole show, my entire show was about Ohio State. Total idiocy. Total idiocy. And rest in peace to that young man who got killed. Just as a side note, so I don't sound heartless and rambling there. That's horrible. Horrible. It sounded like all he was doing was just playing Xbox at his friend's house and eating there. And then he left late at night. I've done that before. Others have done that before. Didn't deserve to die. Anyway, it's just my little short segment on that. It's a bad week. It's a bad week to be a Buckeye fan in a sense, but also in another sense that doesn't reflect on their program at all. It doesn't. I mean, Kirk Barton wasn't even allowed in the Woody Hayes Center because Day caught him stealing practice film and Day kicked him out. And they have an elite class. And I think they're set to be one of the better college football programs moving forward, like they were always going to be under Ryan Day. So that's my tidbit on Ohio State. We're actually going to talk about them tomorrow on our Withdrawal Wednesday because some people have questions about Ohio State that I want to answer. But I want to get to this here before we talk about whether or not Clemson, Penn State, and Texas are in national title or bust seasons. What do you think the long-term expectations should be for Jonathan Smith? And what does Jonathan Smith need to do in 2025 and 2026 to buy your faith, to get you to invest in Michigan State emotionally, physically, going to the games, watching the games, being involved, standing up and not sitting on the bleachers and cheering your team on? What does he need to do? And what should the long-term expectations be for him at Michigan State? When I look at the Spartans and how they went 5-7 last year and 3-6, it was clear they were better than the 2023 year. It was abundantly clear. But the way they finished the year was disheartening. And I know that lost a lot of Spartan fans. It did, because you can't lose to Rutgers by 30 points. You cannot do that. You can't. You cannot look that pathetic against Illinois and never sack Altmaier. You can't do that. You can't. Especially when Illinois' offensive line was one of the worst in America at pass blocking, and you didn't register a single sack. Can't do it. You can't go up against Indiana 10-0 and then get blown out like that. You can't. Although I would excuse some of that because I think Indiana was a very good team. I think Indiana was one of the best teams in the nation at beating the teams you should beat. They may have been the best team in America at beating the teams you should beat. I mean, look at how they played Nebraska versus how Ohio State did. Look at how they played, let's say Maryland or Northwestern in juxtaposition to how Texas played Kentucky, for example. But even then, you can't come out and kind of hint that you don't exactly know a lot about the Michigan State rivalry and lose in that fashion to Michigan. And then the Boston College loss was bad. And I can go on and on and on. It was a better year than the year before, but it was still disheartening in many ways and finished on a bad note. Make sure before we resume to like, to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, and to comment your thoughts down below. And I'd love to have more Spartan fans on the channel, so if you know any who want in-depth college football analysis, and I love covering the Spartans, share this video and this channel with them so we can get more Spartan subscribers. They were 13th in the Big Ten, didn't register a postseason appearance. So again, disheartening year. You want Michigan State, if you're a Spartan fan, to go bowling basically every year. You want them to compete for Big Ten championships, for college football playoff spots, and last year they were not doing that. They showed some signs against Ohio State in the first half and against Oregon for a drive where it looked like, hey, they can hang a little bit with the top teams, but then it fell apart completely against Oregon and against Ohio State. Ohio State just won the turnover battle and won the fourth down battle, and that was it, and it turned into a blowout. So let's look at what I think are the long-term expectations. And what I'll do while discussing these with you is I'll weave in what he needs to do to be successful and what he needs to do this season, and I think the season after that, to achieve buy-in from the donors, from the fan base, from Jay Batt. Although I think Batt is trying to give him everything he can, because Jay Batt's worked at Georgia Tech. Yes, he worked at Alabama, so he knows how to operate a machine. He was their assistant AD. But he was Georgia Tech's AD, and Georgia Tech was rather a dumpster fire when he took it over. So I think he understands the phrase long-term rebuilds and how they apply. Georgia Tech this past season went 7-6 in Key's second year, and if you count his interim year, it was his third year total on the job. For Michigan State, this isn't the 2000s or 2010s anymore. I want to phrase that. And in the 2000s and 2010s, Michigan State's down years were still pretty bad. They went 3-9 in 2016. They had a losing record in several of the mid-early 2000 seasons under John L. Smith and Bobby Williams. Just seasons that were not good whatsoever. They had several choke jobs. They had seasons where they started off high, even under D'Antonio, 2016, 2012, where started off ranked high and then finished just above 500 or below 500. I mean, think about 2018 and 19, the last years under D'Antonio, where they had some talent, they had some players, and it didn't amount to anything. And I know the East doesn't exist, so there will be seasons where, unlike when the East existed, Michigan State will have super easy schedules. There will be seasons like that. The scheduling floor in terms of strength of schedule is lower than it was when the East existed. But I will also say that the ceiling, the potential of a schedule to be so tough, is now at 2023 levels more often than you would think. In 2023, Michigan State had to play, I think, the three best teams in the country. Michigan, who won the title and shut them out. I think they were the best team in America. I think Ohio State was the second best team in the country. They had to play them on the road. I think Washington was third best, maybe second best. But Ohio State was definitely power rated better and had a much higher floor. They had to play Washington at home, and they had to play Penn State in a neutral field at the end of the year. And Penn State, power ratings wise, was a top 5 team per FPI and certainly top 10. I mean, they had an absolute horrible schedule. And they had to play Iowa, who won 10 games. They had to play a Nebraska team who was better than them power ratings wise. They played Rutgers, who won 7 games for the first time in forever under Greg Schiano and as a program in the Big Ten. That type of schedule is going to be more commonplace from here on out than it was in the East, because it seems like Michigan State's willing to schedule tough out-of-conference games, and you can have seasons now where you play Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan all in conference. The potential for your conference slate to look like something out of the SEC, as in last year's Florida or Georgia, is higher than it ever was because of super conferences and because you added really good teams and programs like USC, Oregon, Washington. And I think the average Big Ten team is trending up. USC is coming out of a down cycle. Oregon, I think, is still rising under Lanning. Ohio State is where they have always been in recent memory, and I don't think they're dropping off. Penn State is leveling up under Franklin. Michigan's leveling off, but they're coming from the mountaintop, and they can just as easily get back there. And teams like Washington are on the rise, Nebraska's on the rise, Wisconsin could be, Minnesota's going to be tough. The Big Ten's only getting tougher here. And I say that to say that I think 5-7, 6-6 is the floor. And that'll be this way from here on out. I don't mean to say that a 5-7 or 6-6 team of last season is acceptable. That's unacceptable even this year. I'm talking about 5-7 where you lose all of your close games. You lose a bunch of close games. You're competitive in almost every game. You have some blowout wins. So a team that power ratings wise would be much better than last year, but you finish with a 5-7 record because maybe your schedule's tougher, or you were even more unlucky and you lose all your close games. Same with 6-6. The Big Ten is the toughest it's ever been in its history. It really is, with 18 teams and the amount of high caliber recruiting programs and developmental programs. I think the Big Ten has the best staffs and the best developmental programs in America right now. And in adding Oregon and USC, who I think are top 5 recruiting programs moving forward, with the new NIL rules, even with some of the old NIL rules, and just in this new era, I think that, again, Oregon, USC, Ohio State, those are top 5 recruiting programs from here on out. The Big Ten got closer to the SEC in recruiting and overall football profile than before the Big Ten added UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon, and the SEC added Oklahoma and Texas. So I think there has to be an acceptance that the floor can be low from here on out. But a floor is something that should happen once in a while. Just once in a while. Not every year, not even every other year. And I think this coming season, MSU at least has to go 6-6, preferably more so 7-5, to get buy-in. And I think that 8-4, which is actually my record prediction for them this year, funnily enough, that would be a phenomenal year. And I think it'll be similar in 2026 and moving on. Their schedules, I think from here on out, are actually only going to get tougher or at least remain the same in toughness. But their talent profile should upgrade. Their staff, I think, is one of the best in the Big Ten. So you should expect steady improvement. Similar to, I would comp this to Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Even though Michigan State's a better football program than South Carolina, you don't have the same recruiting bases, the same talent base, the same pipelines. But it's a similar story in the sense that South Carolina and Michigan State shouldn't expect themselves to win the Big Ten even every other year, every 3 years, just with how they operate. They're going to usually be a tier below some other programs. Not saying they should shoot for that. You should try to be the best in America if you can, but it's less realistic for MSU and South Carolina to be the best in America than it is for Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, USC, and Michigan, for example. So I think sometimes seasons like this will occur with Michigan State, and you should be okay with it. I'm not saying that you should put up with it. It should be like, yes, it was disappointing, but we're not going to fire you. Just make sure you're better next year type of thing. Not something that should be consistently accepted. That should be paired with, this team should win, I think under Smith, in the long term, they should win a Big Ten title or 2. And they should compete for the CFP in more years than not. The ceiling should still be high at Michigan State because it is high. They're a top 20 program with a wealthy alumni base, with a good Big Ten endowment, with a wonderful athletic director, and a staff that I would argue is certainly, even at the very worst, top 3rd in the Big Ten. I think at best, top 3 in the Big Ten. So top 6th and possibly top 10 nationally. That should be the expectation for the long term. I think competing for the CFP and 1 or 2 Big Ten titles is realistic. I think that winning 1 or 2 Big Ten titles while Smith is at Michigan State and reaching the CFP some seasons and at least being in the hunt in November more years than not is realistic. It is. And I actually think Michigan State's ceiling is higher than this. I think if Michigan State gets their boosters engaged and fundraises well and upgrades the stadium, retains their staff, brings in more talent than D'Antonio ever did under this staff, and plays their schedule right, I think that they can shoot even higher than this. But I don't want to talk about that yet until I see progress made. It's only been 1 year under the Jonathan Smith era. So just want to be a little bit more patient. But State's a good enough program, I think, to where they could win a title if they have the right coach. A national title. Just don't want to get there yet because of how many good programs and coaches there are, and Michigan State's still in a rebuilding mode and in a rough spot. But I think the long-term expectations for Michigan State and Jonathan Smith, if he wants stability, if he wants job security, the short-term expectations are next year you have to go bowling. And I would say finish with a winning record. 6-7 would buy you time, but I don't think it would get you buy-in. 7-6, 8-5 would get you buy-in for sure. I think 9-4 would result in an outpouring of resources, perhaps greater than even the Mel Tucker era. And then I think that in the long term, Michigan State occasionally are going to have a 500 season because of how talent works, how the portal works, the fact that Michigan State, unless something unforeseen happens, is always going to be out-recruited by probably at least half of the Big Ten programs. That's going to happen occasionally, a 500 season or maybe a win below that. But at the same time, every once in a while to offset that, or more often than having a down year like that, Michigan State should be competing for the Big Ten championship game in November. They should be competing for the college football playoff in November. And they should win a Big Ten title or two and some playoff games under Jonathan Smith with the caliber of coach he is and with the caliber of program that they are historically. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Comment your thoughts on this video down below, and I will see you all very soon. Alrighty, time to move on to national title or bust. Time to do that. And then I'll get off here, and that'll be it. G Sands, fight on Sam, fight on G Sands. Dave's here says Nick Saban couldn't win at MSU. He did at the end. He won 10 games, and he could have won more if he stayed, but he decided not to stay, and I don't think there was the appropriate alignment there that he needed. Okay, so let's talk about Clemson, Texas, and Penn State, and whether or not they are in national title or bust seasons. Are Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers in a national championship or bust season, where they have to win it all, or they at least have to reach the national championship game, make a playoff run, win a bunch of games, preferably if you're going to be a national championship contender, you enter the playoffs with 2 losses at the very worst, undefeated at the best. With Clemson's schedule, it's probably enter the playoff 11-1, 12-0, 13-0, 12-1, 11-2, factoring in the championship game. And from there, you make a playoff run. You at least reach the semifinals, more preferably the national championship game, and win it all or compete for a title. Are they in that type of year where anything less than what I mentioned, so really anything less than 13 or 14 wins, is a failure? Let me know in the comments section below, and please subscribe and like the video. It helps out this channel a lot. We're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers, and liking the video gets us in the algorithm. And if you're a Clemson fan especially, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm covering the ACC more than I ever have before, and I'm pretty high on your team and your program. And I think that Dabo Swinney's take on the transfer portal and on NIL and these changes has actually aged more gracefully than I initially anticipated it to. But that's a topic for another day. I want to talk about here for a few minutes whether or not it's a national title or bust season. So Clemson went 10-4 last year, 7-1 in ACC play. They won the ACC championship. They did. And they played Texas more competitively than many expected in the first round on the road. Their preseason win total is 9.5. Their preseason S&P Plus is a 23.3, which means they're viewed as 23.3 points better than the average college football team per Bill Connolly. They're 8th there, and they return 80% of their production, which is first. They bring back players who I think are all Americans. I'll actually give you my All-American teams, which I'll make a video on sometime in July. Cade Klubnik, I have as the best overall quarterback in America. First team All-American. I have Ryan Linthicum as a 6th team All-American center, honorable mention. I have Blake Miller as a 4th team All-American tackle. I have TJ Moore as a 1st team All-American wide receiver, and Bryant Wesco and Antonio Williams are 2nd team All-American wide receivers. My All-American teams are huge. I have 6 of them as well, and I have more players per team than most do, but still, it's a high honor. These are still some of the best players in America. I have Peter Woods as the best overall D tackle, 1st team All-American. DeMonte Capehart is a fifth-team All-American, honorable mention. TJ Parker is a first-team edge. Will Health is a sixth-teamer. I have Sammy Brown as a fifth-teamer, honorable mention. And I also have Avion, Terrell, and Ashton Hampton at corner as All-Americans. Terrell on the second team, Hampton on the honorable mention fifth team. In total, I tab 13 All-Americans. I have Garrett Riley as a top 5 offensive coordinator. Sweeney all-time is a top, I would say, 15 or 10 head coach all-time. And then looking at his resume stacked against other coaches, he's at least a top 3 head coach. Currently, I got to be honest here, I would not rank him in the here and now for coaches in terms of their resume over the past 4 years, how they've performed relative to the talent they've had, their expectations, their conference, and whether or not I'd hire them now. I would not have Sweeney top 10. But I still think he's a good coach, a great coach, and I think that Tom Allen is a defensive coordinator who's much, much better than Wes Goodwin. And when you return 4/5 of your production, use the portal lightly, you barely lose everyone, and you have players who are young and they haven't played a bunch or at all. They have a year of development from a top 10 staff in America, and they're ready to play and contribute. This team is deep. This team has a ton of NFL players. And last season, they were fraudulent at points against Georgia, against Louisville. That South Carolina game they should have won. They had no business losing that game. And yet, because Lenora Sellers was amazing, Clemson got conservative. And because the offense and defense they had, there's just inconsistencies. They did, yes, lose. But all that being said, I do think this is a national title or bust season. I really do. Let's look at the schedule before we end this segment here. So, Clemson, they start off against LSU at home. That should be a blowout win. They play Troy in week 2, should be even more of a blowout win. Georgia Tech on the road week 3, could be a loss. It's, I think, one of the few games that would be an acceptable loss, but it should be a win. Syracuse at home week 4 should be a dominant win. They get a bye week 5, and off that bye, they travel to North Carolina. That should be a win. Same with the road game against Boston College week 7. SMU at home week 8. That should be a win. Could be competitive because I think SMU's good, but it should be a win. Bye week 9. Duke at home week 10 should be a dominant win. Same with Florida State in week 11 at home in Death Valley. At Louisville will be tough. I think Louisville has matchup edges against Clemson they showed last year that remain this year. Should be a win in week 12. Furman week 13, obvious win. And South Carolina on the road should be a win with how much South Carolina loses and how much Clemson brings back. There is a path, and I think a very realistic and easy path to go 12-0. And whether they play Louisville, SMU, Miami, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, or someone else in the ACC championship game, I think Clemson's the best team in the ACC, so they should win that. I think the only team in the ACC who's close to them talent-wise is Miami, and they're better coached, they have a better staff, they're more experienced. I just think that Clemson's the best overall team in the ACC, and they're kind of in their own tier, or at least a half tier above the teams that are the closest to them. So 11-1, 12-0 is what the regular season should bear. Looking at the ACC championship game, you're going to be playing, I think, a top 10 team or top 15 team there. So that can be a bit of a coin flip. Again, entering the playoffs, you have to be 11-2, 12-0, 11-1. You could do the Ohio State path of last year where they're 10-2 and get in. But then Clemson would have to probably go on the road because they're in the ACC to, or maybe they'd get a home game, I don't know, but you don't want to really risk that. Getting the bye, if possible, or guaranteeing yourself a home game would be advantageous. And this is a team who will get hot, should get hot in the playoffs. They're experienced. Sweeney's been to the playoffs multiple times, so he knows what it's like. These players were in the playoffs last year in a road environment, so they should know what it's like. And with the amount of NFL talent, college All-American talent, the staff upgrades they've made, this is a title or bust year, especially since Clemson has not been recruiting and developing at the level they need to be a title contender every year. After this year, they're going to lose a ton of their production, and they're probably going to have a 2023 caliber year, or a 2021-2022 caliber year, where you lose 3 games and in a different universe you lose even more. I think, at least. So they I cannot stress this enough. They have to compete for a national title. And I would say that means at least reaching the title game for Clemson. That's what that means, if not winning it all. And I think anything less than that is not necessarily a failure. I think a failure would be not advancing past the quarterfinals. Definitely not advancing past the first round. But for the season to be a success and not just maybe a little bit of a disappointment or just, meh, it was good. We were a good team, but we didn't achieve what we wanted to. For the season to be a success, I think they have to at least reach the semifinals and play a very competitive game, show that they can be a top dog. And I think more preferably for the season to be a resounding success, they have to play in the national championship game, if not win the national championship. So that's my assessment. This is a national championship or bust season at Clemson because they're losing a ton of talent after this year. They have the most experienced roster in the country, one of the deepest. Their talent roster is still close to the Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregons of the world. And they haven't recruited at the level they need to where after this year they can't just reload. This is a do or die season for Dabo Swinney and Clemson football. Thank you so much for tuning into this segment. Make sure again to subscribe, hit the bell, like the video, and comment below. I'll see you all in the next one. What about Penn State? Is Penn State in a national championship or bust season? They bring back 65% of their production. First rounder Drew Aller, at least he's projected to be a first round QB in the 2026 draft, and potential first rounders Denai Dennis Sutton and AJ Harris. They hired Jim Knowles away from Ohio State, the best defensive coordinator in the nation. And I think Andy Kolnicki is also the best defensive coordinator in the nation. They went 13-3 last year, the Nittany Lions did, with an 8-1 Big Ten record. They played in the Big Ten championship game. Their preseason win total is a 10.5, and their S&P Plus ranking per Bill Connolly in the preseason is 3rd, with a 27.7 S&P Plus preseason rating. It's a 1/5 of a point behind Alabama, and it's only 2 points behind Ohio State. So I look at the Nittany Lions and I think to myself that this isn't similar to, it is similar in the sense of the strategy, the roster, and the staff to 2024 Ohio State and 2023 Michigan. But at the same time, those teams entered said seasons with a reputation of still winning big games. Not winning them all, not winning the biggest one of them all, the national title, but Ryan Day, was beating James Franklin and beat Marcus Freeman and beat good teams and competed with Georgia in the playoffs and almost beat them by double digits. And Jim Harbaugh was beating Ohio State, beating Penn State, reached the playoff and got blown out by Georgia and lost in close fashion to a TCU team they should have destroyed. But they had some big wins baked in. And Penn State just hasn't had that under Franklin in recent memory, even though they have taken steps up from where they were in the 2010s. So I think factoring that in, combined with the fact that they are not recruiting at a top 5 level every year, and some years they don't even recruit top 10, even with their amazing staff, that if they keep around, I think they'll be title contenders almost every year. I do think this is a national title or bust season for Penn State. And before we resume, please like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for my channel, and also hit the notification bell for the Penn State football podcast that's in the description. That way you can keep up to date with all of my Penn State football coverage or national coverage, maybe for like a top 10 team ranking that includes Penn State, because I have them as my best team overall, number 1 team overall, entering 2025. And you can keep up to date with any of my thoughts on Penn State that way. Also, check out our Discord server via the link in the description and watch as much of this segment as you can. And again, like the video. Those things help us get into the algorithm. They're totally free. Don't sign you up for anything. Let me tell you more of why this is a national title or bust year for Penn State. Number 1, their schedule is maybe tougher than it looks initially, but I think that combined with their roster and staff means their floor is probably 10-2. They get Nevada, FIU, and Villanova at home in weeks 1 through 3. They get a bye week 4, host Oregon week 5 in the whiteout. They travel to UCLA in week 6, host Northwestern week 7, travel to Iowa, which is going to be hard, but they get a bye following that game so they can sell out for it. before the bye in Week 9. They travel to Ohio State in Week 10, host Indiana Week 11, travel to Michigan State Week 12, host Nebraska Week 13, and travel to Rutgers in Week 14. You got Ohio State on the road. You got Oregon at home, Indiana on the road, Iowa on the road. It's essentially, in my mind, a 4-game schedule. Now, maybe I'm underestimating Michigan State and Rutgers, maybe even underestimating Nebraska. But the 3 non-conference games should be auto wins, and Penn State's talented enough to where they're probably going to be favored in every single one of their games except for the Ohio State game. And maybe they'll be favored against Ohio State when they play them. Who knows? So that's reason number 1, is I think the schedule combined with what they return works out for them to reach the playoffs with 11 wins like they did last year. Therefore, get a home game and get an advantageous road to win it all. Number 2 is the amount of high-quality players they have. Let me read you my All-American team, or at least the players on my All-American team from Penn State. I have Drew Aller on my second All-American team at quarterback, Nicholas Singleton on my first team, Katron Allen on my second team. And my All-American teams in both number of teams and number of players per teams are larger, but it's still an honor because we're talking about the best players in America here. Players who are top 25 at their position, and if you're on the first or second team, you're top 5 or top 5, certainly top 10 in your position. I'll make a video about those lists in the future. Nick Dawkins is on my third team All-American at center. Vega Ione is my best overall guard entering this year. I have Nolan Rucci on my second team at tackle and Anthony Dunco on my fifth team at tackle. And Drew Shelton could make this list for sure. I have Trevor Pena at wide receiver on my third team and Devontae Ross on my honorable mention fifth team. Luke Reynolds is also on the honorable mention fifth team at tight end. Zane Durant, first team All-American at D tackle. Alonzo Ford's a third teamer at D tackle, and Ty Blanding is on the honorable mention fifth team at D tackle. I have Dennis Sutton on my second All-American team at edge. At linebacker, I have Tony Roas on my second team. I have Dominic DeLuca on the sixth team. I think especially under Knowles that you're going to see the Penn State defensive front take a leap forward, or just the overall defense. Zakee Wheatley's on my first team at safety. And then I have A.J. Harris as the number 1 overall corner this year, first team. Elliot Washington's on the honorable mention, fifth team. 20 All-Americans. Now, again, list is larger than most others, if not everyone else's All-American lists. I do that intentionally because there's just so many great players who I think should be on All-American lists that have to get left out because of the limited slots. And it isn't a participation trophy. You're still one of the best players in America, even on my expanded All-American lists. There's no one who's just good on there. They're all either great at the absolute worst or near elite, potentially generational, and in the case of someone like Jeremiah Smith, centennial on the list. Penn State, I think, has the best starting roster in America. I don't know if it's the deepest because of where they are at recruiting, but I'd like to think with their staff, they very well could be. And I think that their starting roster is the best, for sure. It's balanced. There aren't any obvious weaknesses, especially after what Penn State did in the portal. And we already talked about their schedule. I mean, they should win 11 or 12 games in the regular season. 10-2 is the absolute worst case scenario in my mind. And I know James Franklin has not won the big game. He hasn't. But I think he's a top 20 head coach overall, and I think Knowles and Kotelnicki are the best coordinators in their respective fields. I really do. I think Singleton's the best back in America, Vega is the best guard, and Harris is the best corner. This is a team who could, if everything goes right, be better than the Ohio State team who beat them last year in Happy Valley, and better than the Michigan team who came before that Ohio State team. They could be that elite. They could be the best national champions since 2020 Bama or 2021 Georgia. Or maybe they're not as good as the prior champions, but they still win it all anyway. This is a team who I think, when I look at 2023 Michigan, for example, and how they were able to run the ball for 30-something times, I think it was 34 times in a row against Penn State to close out the game, I think this Penn State offensive line and running back room could do that. I do. I think about Tyler Warren and how they ran him in the Wildcat a bunch last year. And I think that, Luke Reynolds, while I don't think he'll be Tyler Warren, I think he'll certainly be a great tight end this year. And there's just so much diversity in the offense and so many different strengths on the team overall where I think they should expect to win a title. Penn State needs to not only win the big game, whether that's Oregon, Ohio State, or preferably both. I think they need to win the Big Ten. And if they don't win the Big Ten, they have to win it all or the year's a failure. If they win the Big Ten and compete for a title and maybe lose in the title game, I wouldn't call the season a success, but I wouldn't call it a failure either. Just be kind of like good team. It was fun, and it wasn't a failure, but it wasn't this resounding success either. This is a national title or bust year for Penn State, absolutely, because they do not recruit at the level to immediately be in the top 5 picture next year. They could be, but they're not guaranteed to because of their talent. They have a lot of older, elite players who will be leaving after this year all at once. There's no guarantee that Kotelnicki will stay, and while it's Jim Knowles' first year, so there's probably a guarantee that he will stay. Losing Kotelnicki will be huge. And James Franklin also does not have the track record to suggest that after a year where maybe he does win it all, or, at least wins the game against Ohio State, wins the Big Ten, he doesn't have the track record to say that he'll do that the following year, or even the year after that. We're coming in on year 10 since he won the Big Ten back in 2016. That's what we're coming on. So, yeah, it's absolutely a national title or bust year for those reasons. The lack of talent in the 2 or 3 deep to where I don't think that'll be a problem this year, but next year you'll see a drop off in the starting talent. The fact that Kotelnicki is probably interested in becoming a head coach somewhere, so you'd lose a great staffer. James Franklin's lack of replicated success at a high level, and the fact that you're top 25 in returning production, and last year you were a top 5 team. So it's time to win it all, James Franklin. It's time to win it all, not just win the big game. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, comment below. I appreciate you for doing those things. They help me out and they help you out. We'll see you soon. And finally, we'll talk about Texas. And then I'll immediately get out of here because I am starving. Oh my gosh, I have another comment. I'm gonna have to screenshot this one again. I'm gonna have to do it. Bald Father Betts is making me screenshot something that I have to keep in my image folder. But Sam, based on Ohio State fans, Penn State will be lucky to win a game with how terrible their new DC is. Are you looking past that? Oh my gosh, you're hilarious. Before we move on to Texas here and talking about whether it's a national title or bust year for them, Jim Knowles has traditionally struggled in year 1 at his new stops. I get that. There's a chance he will this season with Penn State, but by struggling at Penn State, I mean he just won't have a top 5 defense. It'll still be top 10 with what he inherited. What people don't get is that Penn State has had top 10 defenses year over year over year. They have elite assistants. They recruit well there. They develop well there. Defense is in their DNA. It's in their culture in a way that even Ohio State, after they fielded elite defenses, it's going to be tested there. It will be. Because, they had Jeff Hafley, but then he had Kerry Coombs, and then he had Knowles, and now he's going to have Patricia. I think Patricia will be good. I don't know if he'll live up to the Ohio State standard, which is going to be very high after what Knowles left, but he'll be good nationally, and with the talent that'll probably translate to having great defenses. But elite, I don't quite think so. Knowles is elite, though, and he's way better than Tom Allen. I think he's better than Manny Diaz, and I think the 23 season showed that, where I think Diaz had a way more talented defensive roster, and by way more, it's probably a little bit of hyperbole, but he had a much more talented D-line. I think he had more talented safeties that year, more talented linebackers, and Knowles' defense performed better in all the metrics that mattered, like points allowed per play. Diaz had only the better running defense because he blitzed all the time and got sacks, and Knowles ran a very conservative unit that ultimately helped him in big games more than Diaz's strategies helped him. Yeah, I mean, Baldfather Betts just put it perfectly. The difference in defenses he inherited at Ohio State was near Oklahoma Riley level bad. Like, Grinch's 2020 Oklahoma defense was better than any of Kerry Coombs' defenses. And I don't think Grinch's 2020 defense was all that amazing. It was probably inflated in part by the COVID year. He's inheriting a top 10 defense at Penn State and probably a top 5 defensive culture at Penn State. And that combined with him being the best DC, and you have some 5-star and several top 100 and 4-star players on the roster and elite coaches, some of whom are better coaches than other programs that recruit at a high level on defense, higher than Penn State, I think means he could have a top 3 defense this year. Heck, his defense could be number 1. It could be number 2. It's not a guarantee with, Texas, for example, we're talking about here, who preseason at least should be favored to have the number 1 defense. And Ohio State's going to contend for that. Alabama could, year 2 of their staff and what they bring back. But it's a fool's errand to underestimate Penn State, especially when they have Jim Knowles. Especially, I think Day's an elite coach. He's a top 2 coach, but I also don't think it's a coincidence that Knowles came in and the 3 teams under Knowles easily could have won it all had things went differently. In 2022 against Georgia, a field goal or a dropped pick against Bennett being a catch means they win it all. In 2023, McCord not throwing a pick inside the 10, or maybe Tommy Eichenberg makes a tackle better, means Ohio State beats Michigan and they probably win it all that year because they were the second best team in America. There's not just the lore behind, what if Georgia three-peated if they beat Alabama in 2023? There's also the lore behind, what if you change 3 plays and Ohio State three-peats from 2022 to 2024? And Knowles was a part of that. So it's a fool's errand to underestimate that guy. It's ridiculous. But let's talk about Texas before we get out of here. Is Texas and Steve Sarkisian under national championship, or I should rephrase that. Are Steve Sarkisian and Texas football under national championship or bust pressure entering 2025? Do they need to win it all in Arch Manning's first year starting at quarterback and with a lot of highly touted NFL first-round players coming back? And Colin Simmons is one of those, and he'll be back for another year in 2026. Do the Longhorns need to earn their first title since 2005 in order to call the season a success? Well, before we get to that answer, please like the show, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. And I'm looking forward to covering Texas football on a weekly basis. I'm very invested in this team because I think it's going to be one of the best programs moving forward in the future. I genuinely believe that. It's phenomenal what Steve Sarkisian's done. That's why I had to pause there, because you could use so many different words to describe what Texas is doing right now, but all of them would have to be eloquent and all of them would have to be full of praise. They've gotten better every year under Sark. They just signed the number 1 overall class in the 2025 cycle. They're working on earning another elite class. And the donor, money, location, culture, coaching staff combo they have, I think is the best in America moving forward. I genuinely believe that. And that's also to say that, strangely enough, I don't know if it's a national title or bust year for the Longhorns. With Clemson and Penn State who I talked about earlier in this national title or bust segment while live, if you're watching this outside of the live show when it's clipped, make sure to hit the notification bell so you can get notified when I go live Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. The reason why I called Clemson and Penn State national title or bust teams, which means one of them will probably have a disappointing season guaranteed because only one team can win it all, is that they're not recruiting or developing or coaching in recent memory at the level to where they could lose all of their seniors this year and not reach the title game or not win it, and then immediately reload and be in that conversation next year, especially Clemson, especially them. Penn State's just also in the national title or bust conversation because of how good their team should be. Like they should be head and shoulders above everyone else, with Texas and maybe Clemson being the only exceptions to that rule. But even then, I do think Penn State should be that good. But Texas has done this before in terms of losing a bunch of players to the NFL, and they reload, and they don't just reload, but they actually upgrade. And there's a chance they could do that this year. So on one hand, I almost think the answer should be yes, because of how they're continually upgrading their roster. Manning should be better than Ewers. It's not a guarantee, but he should be better than Ewers. And Texas does a really good job of keeping around their coordinators, keeping around their assistants, and they return older players. I mean, they only bring back 51% of their production, and yet their preseason S&P Plus rating is 5th, viewed as 26.4 points better than the average college football team. Their win total is 9.5 while playing Ohio State on the road in non-conference, and they won 13 games last year. They went 13-3, 7-1, and I mean, look at their depth chart. Look at how many seniors they still have on their depth chart. For example, Anthony Hill Jr. is an old player. I don't quite know if he's a senior. No, he's a junior, but still, junior, older player, is going to go to the draft after this year. Trey Moore is a fifth-year player. Michael Taff is a fifth-year player, All-American caliber player. Jalen Gilbo is a senior. Malik Muhammad and Jelani McDonald are seniors. Jordan Johnson-Rubel is a true sophomore at boundary side safety. Colin Simmons at edge, outside linebacker, sophomore, but freak All-American. And then you have Travis Shaw, Cole Brevard at defensive tackle, who are seniors. Ethan Burke is a senior at defensive end. And then you look at offense, and offense is younger than defense, but Cole Hudson didn't start last year at center. We'll start this year at center. He's a senior. DJ Campbell at guard is a senior. Neto Umeozulu at left guard is a redshirt junior. Trevor Goosby's a redshirt sophomore. Brandon Baker is a true sophomore. There's no freshmen on that O-line, and 4 of them are at least 3-year players. 3 of them are 4-year players. And then Manning's a redshirt sophomore. Wisner is a junior. Baxter is a redshirt sophomore. Incoming tight end Jack Endries, I believe, is a junior or senior. Ryan Wingo is a freak sophomore. DeAndre Moore Jr. is a junior. I like the combination of both young upside but also proven seniority with Texas. And a lot of that seniority and even some of the juniors, as we saw last year where players with eligibility left for the draft when they could have come back, on one hand, that makes me think, yeah, Texas should expect to win it all, especially when they have Arch Manning at quarterback and it's not a guarantee he'll come back. But at the same time, I think to myself that Texas, they can do this every year. They can be in the national title race, and they will be every single year. And they're still not quite at the point where I think their roster talent has peaked, where I think Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State have reached that point where they're not going to get more talented on their rosters. They aren't. Texas, I think, maybe is there, or they're a year or two away, but they still have some of those classes in the mix that weren't top 5 or weren't quite the quality of Ohio State, Alabama, or Georgia. So I still think they're approaching their peak in a sense. And since they can contend for a title every year, if they don't win it all this year, they can just win it all the following year, in a sense. And Sark is entering his 5th season, second in the SEC. But then the counter to the counter is that when I look at my All-American teams, which are larger than most, and I have 6 teams total, more players per team, more teams than most outlets produce, I have Manning as a third team All-American, and he could be higher than that. I'm just a little bit cautious because hasn't started many games. Ewers last year was inconsistent, and I just kind of want to see where Manning's at before I peg him as a top 2 QB. I have Baxter on my 3rd team at running back. Cole Hudson's on my honorable mention 6th team at center. DJ Campbell at guard is a 2nd team All-American. And Neto Umeozulu, sorry about that mispronunciation, is an honorable mention All-American at guard. Trevor Gooseby I have as an honorable mention tackle on the 6th team. I have Ryan Wingo on my 2nd team All-American at wide receiver. DeAndre Moore Jr. on my 5th team honorable mention. Jack Endry's the tight ends on my 3rd team. Cole Brevard's on my 2nd team at D tackle. I have Colin Simmons as the best overall defensive end, edge, outside linebacker. I just edge to kind of group them all together in America. I have Anthony Hill Jr. as my best overall linebacker. And I have Trey Moore on my 4th team All-American list at linebacker. Michael Taff I have as the 2nd best safety in America, only behind Caleb Downs. He's on my 1st team. And I have Malik Muhammad on my 6th team honorable mention unit at corner. Jelani McDonald is also there just at safety. Mason Shipley, 5th teamer for kicker. Jack Bowmeister at punter, 3rd teamer. Altogether, 18 All-Americans on my massive All-American team, only behind Penn State there. And a lot of those guys will be leaving. A lot of them, to be fair, like Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons will be coming back. I imagine if Manning does not have a generational season that he would be back at least for his redshirt junior year. I imagine that. Maybe it's a foolish guess. And then much of Texas's offensive line would be back the following year. So I'm going to lean no for Texas. I don't think it is a title or bust season. However, what I will say is that they have to win a big game. They have to make progress. And what that means is there are 3 big games on the schedule. Maybe 4, maybe 5. But the 3 biggest I think of are Ohio State week 1, Georgia week 12. Those are the 2 biggest in their own tier. But I think at Florida week 6, got to pay attention there. Got to keep the foot on the gas against Oklahoma week 7. And A&M in week 13, that's another must win. And I would say if you're Texas, you got to go 10-2, 11-1, 12-0. 9-3 would be a disaster with what they bring back. And yeah, with what they bring back and the fact that they've recruited, I think, at the ideal level in terms of fitting the meta. I've criticized several other teams, or at least point out the fact that, Georgia has not figured out how to recruit wide receiver. Ohio State's neglected O-line recruiting. And Oregon is still leveling up their roster talent. Alabama, I think, has neglected development overall recently. More so in terms of college development. Obviously, I think their players have still been fit for the pros, but if they've been properly implemented and developed for college play, or even developed for the NFL to be at their peak performance when entering the draft, I don't exactly know. Texas, I don't think has had any of those issues. So, well, a lot of these programs that lose a bunch, like Texas, if they go 9-3, I think to myself, it'd be disappointing, but it wouldn't be a disaster. I think Texas, especially losing 3 games, would kind of be, they got to win a big game because they didn't last year. Michigan was preseason top 10, but they were not a top 10 caliber team. They weren't. And then they lost to Georgia twice, lost to Ohio State. They played Georgia the second time competitively, and Ohio State competitively in the playoffs, but you have to get over that hump. You do, I think. It'd be a statement win especially. So a schedule that is Ohio State on the road, San Jose State at home, UTEP at home, Sam Houston at home, Florida on the road, Oklahoma neutral field, Kentucky on the road week 8, Mississippi State on the road week 9, Vanderbilt week 10, Georgia on the road week 12, Arkansas week 13, A&M week 14. Am I reading this correctly? That Texas only has 3 home conference games, and then from week 6 to week 9, they're not at home? Wow. That'll be tough, but I think Texas is significantly better than all of those teams as well. And I really believe that. So, not quite national title or bust, but Texas absolutely needs to get back to the semifinals, and they need to win a big game. Whether that's against Ohio State on the road, or Georgia on the road, or they win the SEC, and preferably 2 big games instead of 1, and again have that playoff success. And if they win the national championship, well, that's fantastic, and that would be the only thing that I think would make this season absolutely fantastic. So they're close. They're close to, I think, a title or bust year, but I don't think they're quite at the level that Clemson or Penn State are, because there's not the same urgency. Sweeney and Franklin have been around longer than Sark has. You kind of know who they are more than you know of who Sark is, and they don't have the talent every year to lose a bunch or to not win it all and then immediately rebound the following year and be in contention. They just don't recruit at the level that Texas does there. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell. I appreciate those things very much. They help you out and they help me out. I'll see you guys soon in the next segment. Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to get out of here. I'm going to eat, and I'm going to release some of these segments. The Pac-12 teams I'm going to release tonight, and then other teams going to release tomorrow. Make sure, and hey, College Football 360, thank you for being a moderator. How are you doing? You should check out his channel. Just released a Big Ten prediction segment. You should check it out. Watch his show. We're going to be live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time to answer your questions, and I have several of them to answer. So submit a question via the Discord server. Just join the Discord server, navigate to the YouTube mailbox section, and ask me a question, and I may answer it tomorrow. In fact, you know what? To incentivize you to join it, yes. I will answer one question that is deposited to me today via the Discord server. So if you want that question, if you want a question answered, go through, join the Discord server, ask one right now. I will see you guys very soon. Have a great day, and